It's 7:15. Thanks very much for joining us on AM this morning. The ACT Party's relentless focus on defining the treaty principles may have resonated with voters, with a recent poll showing a boost of more than 5%. It also shows if an election were held today, New Zealand First wouldn't be needed to form a government. The Green Party has taken a hit in this poll, down nearly 5 points following a shaky start to the year, some might say. ACT's David Seymour and the Greens' Chlöe Swarbrick join us this morning. Good morning to both of you.
That's a mighty
I do want to look at that poll, but I think something that is actually far more important right now is our response to the cyclone a year on. We had a story on Newshub Live at 6 last night, which was going to an orchard where they still have 12,500 truckloads of silt to remove from the orchard. So I think people like that would rather us talk about this than the poll results right now. This was the Bearsleys. Firstly, Chloe, your reaction to the $63 million in extra funding that's been announced to help these kind of projects?
Yeah, look, it's always great to see more funding and more resources announced to help people in these kinds of situations. And we know, based on, I believe it was Treasury, did some accounting of the damages and loss. And this is obviously apart from the horrendous loss of human life that was experienced with the Auckland anniversary floods and Cyclone Gabrielle that ravaged the North Island. And they estimated that it was between $9 and $14 billion, if I recall correctly, in terms of the damage to businesses and to properties and to infrastructure as well. And unfortunately, I think a year on from those tragic weather events, we are in a situation right now where we are no better prepared for climate change charged weather events by virtue of not having progressed some of the work with climate change adaptation. It'll be seen whether the government picks that up. It was recommended by the former Minister of Climate Change, obviously the Honourable James Shaw, that go to Select Committee for a cross-partisan inquiry, because we are going to have really tough conversations as a country about who pays the bill when events like this do occur. But we also simultaneously have to reconcile with the reality that we can't simply adapt our way out of this climate crisis if we continue to pour more oil and gas onto it. So we also have to do that mitigation piece as well.
David?
Well, first of all, I mean, I've visited the Bay and gone up to Gisborne many times over the last year. And when you meet people, I don't know that I met the Beasleys, but you saw them on TV. I've been to orchards like that. People are devastated, and there's always people that get caught between a rock and a hard place, and the insurance doesn't quite come through, and they're still waiting. So you've got to acknowledge it's devastating for a lot of people. I mean, I'm very pleased to say that the government has put another $63 million, and that's going to clear over 1 million cubic metres of further silt. That stuff is toxic, it kills the trees, makes it very hard for people to get their property back to being productive, so that's very helpful. And I think Chloe's got a point that the government put a huge amount of money into trying to stop the use of oil and gas and so on. The problem is the rest of the world didn't quite get the memo and kept doing it. So immediately the question goes back to, well, what can we do in New Zealand to make sure that we're prepared for extreme weather events? Whether the rest of the world keeps doing what they're doing, whether these weather events are caused or connected with climate change, there's always going to be events like this, and having good infrastructure is the solution. Now, the previous government, they had a $4 billion climate fund. None of it went into adaptation. It all went into trying to reduce emissions, which the rest of the world has just cancelled out anyway. What's critical is that we actually make sure we do the infrastructure investment. For example, I visited an orchard that was completely destroyed because the riverbank gave way. Now, on the other side of the riverbank held, and the people's houses were fine. And that, in a picture, really illustrated the challenge for me.
We're getting into some really big picture stuff there, but I actually just want to bring it back into regulations around removal, because there were new regulations that were brought in place under the previous government late last year, and it means, well, they're tougher rules basically that about removing slash on land that could be eroded. Landowners would need council consent to plant forests. As Minister of Regulation now, David, will you keep those rules? That regulation's not going to go?
Yeah, because there's a fundamental question of property rights here. You know, you're over there with your forest, I'm over here with my house or trying to go across my bridge to get to work, and your activity is harming mine. So when you have a situation where one person's activity genuinely harms another, that's the place to have regulation. Now, a lot of my focus is that there's a whole lot of rules and regulations that aren't protecting anyone from anything, but are costing a huge amount of time, slowing down the economy and making us poorer than we'd otherwise be. That's where we're going to focus, getting rid of bad rules and regulations.
Okay, so you're on board with these. That's fine, that's staying.
Yeah, there's a fundamental problem that needs to be solved there, so yes.
And there should be a precautionary approach applied to it as well.
Okay, if we can move on now to leadership in the Green Party, Chlöe. We spoke with Alex Folkes this morning, and he is actually quite supportive of you, but he also says that there are some more radical suggestions he would have, and he believes that there are some in the party who want you to go further. Do you believe that you aren't going as far as some Green Party members want you to?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I'm stoked to be in the party with the most open and transparent democracy in our parliamentary system. You know, we've still got 2 more days if any other Green Party members across the rest of the country would like to put themselves forward and engage in this robust debate about the future of our party. I think that's exciting and awesome, and is something that should get people invigorated and engaged in our internal democracy. And
Who should they vote for in the party, though?
Well, the reason that I put myself forward is because I believe that I've demonstrated that I am committed to, and as I said in my introductory remarks when I made that announcement committing to running for the co-leadership, I believe myself to be a well-researched radical. So I believe that the solutions that are necessary to the dual crises of climate and inequality are now necessarily radical in terms of systems transformation. But I will bring to that evidence-based policies to help us achieve that, as well as movement building so that we have the mandate of the people in a sustainable manner to get those changes.
So what you're saying is you want to be radical but realistic?
Well, I think that you can see, based on my work across the parliamentary aisle over the last 6 years, that I am pragmatic. I'm always going to try and work across the aisle to actually achieve tangible change. But I'm also going to be
Some members don't like that, though. You know, they don't want you to say stuff like that.
No, I think that some members, all of our Green Party members, want to see us confronting the challenges that are before us. I think that the tension is potentially about how fast that pace of change is, or whether we're comfortable with breaking things along the way. And the point that I consistently come back to is that actually what we have to do in order to meet the scale of the climate crisis in particular is that we are going to have to see cooperation of humankind at a scale unlike we have ever seen before. And that is going to require ensuring that as many people as possible are educated about the challenges that are in front of us, but also that we have the social licence to do these things. Because it is the case that this government has an agenda where they are pouring oil and gas on the climate crisis fire. They are pursuing tax and economic policies that they know will widen inequality and increase house prices. And we know that we have evidence and evidence-based policies that can actually solve these problems. But it's going to require New Zealanders getting involved and fighting for them.
If we can just stay on the Green Party leadership question for a moment.
It's so soundbitey.
We want to talk about soundbites.
Rom nom nom word salad.
David, do you recommend being a party leader? And would you have any advice for Chlöe in, you know, if she potentially does win the leadership race as a leader yourself? Do you recommend it?
Well, look, there's a couple of things about it. I mean, one is that you do end up working harder than if you're not a leader, because, you know, you have to be up, you have to front. Ultimately, it comes back to you, and you also become responsible for a whole lot of other admin stuff within your party and conflicts, what people want you to do this and that. So it's definitely like being an MP, but just kind of more. On the other hand, you have a chance to shape where your party goes and put out ideas that might not otherwise get debated. And I've been lucky to be able to do that with quite a few issues over the years. And with a little bit of luck, you know, the Greens' recent polling dip is only because voters are worried you might not become the new leader. And as soon as you are, you'll have lots of great opportunities.
I'll take that.
Do you think that's what the dip is, Chlöe?
Look,
Because it's dropped 4.8% in the latest Curia poll.
So what we tend to say with polling, and something that I've actually always said, because people may remember that in 2020 we had 2 or 3 polls which put me well behind any chance of winning in Auckland Central, is people should not watch the polls but realise that we are the polls. You know, these are not a self-fulfilling prophecy. They only become that if people take them as destiny. So I think it's also important too, just from a data and analytical perspective, to take polls with a grain of salt and to put them in the context of the broader trend of polls. This one seems to go against that trend, so if we had to kind of bungle a few of them together that do come out in the next few weeks, then I think that we'll have a greater sense of where things are at and where sentiment is at out there in the community. But we also know that we're around 2.5, 3 years away from the next election, so there is a lot of work to do, and obviously this is why I put myself forward to be the co-leader of the Greens, to invigorate our branches across this country and to remind New Zealanders of their power.
So, I mean, if we've still got another few years for an election, then the 5.6 points the ACT has gone up doesn't really mean anything, does it, David? Or does it mean something to you?
Well, I mean, I occasionally do agree with Chloe. I think the polls matter in the long-term trend. So, you know, people will say, oh, this is big news and it shows this and that. It may do, you know, it may be that people have reacted to the news over the last week. Certainly the messages I've been getting, they like that we stand for something. And even when you go to an environment like Waitangi, where, you know, a lot of what goes on is designed to intimidate you. And you say, no, well, these
really?
Yeah, I think so.
You think Waitangi is designed to intimidate?
Well, certainly the experience I've had, you know, a lot of the customs are literally challenges. So yes, and
challenges in a let's debate this kind of way, or an intimidation kind of way?
Well, a lot of the tikanga, for example, you know, the laying down of the wero, I mean, that's literally a challenge. A lot of the debate on the marae, you know, is really face to face, not unlike the setup that you have in a parliament. So yes, it is a challenging environment, literally and metaphorically. But, you know, the messaging we get is people like that you've got a set of values and you know, clearly and politely articulate them respectfully but firmly. So, you know, there's some positivity around that. On the other hand, I'd say, you know, next week there could be a poll that goes down. And where I agree with Chloe is you look at the overall trends, you know, 4 years ago ACT had 1 MP, then 10, now 11. This poll says we get 17, but as you say, you know, it's 2.5 years to another election, and so in a sense it doesn't really mean that much.
Wonderful. Thank you both for your time this morning. ACT Party Leader David Seymour and Green Party MP Chlöe Swarbrick.